The Pyro Nation Natlan has finally been teased, and it is coming in just a couple patches. We're going to go over the teaser and obviously what we can glean from that, but more importantly, and I think more excitingly, we're going to talk about the implications of what if we get a level 100? What will the regional gimmick do? What will the Archon do? What old units will be buffed? And I actually think we have more clues than you think. Let's get into it. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we build and test every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. So taking a look at what we actually were shown, we're shown the 3 starter Pokemon, and it's absolutely no coincidence that it's a fire, water, grass starter Pokemon theme. They're definitely taking heavy inspiration from Pokemon, and I don't think this is bad, and I don't think this is anything even really all that new or surprising. If you look at Kale with her Cullen Amber thing, it looks just like Mimikyu. They're very, very, very similar. And overall, the design language and the art style, obviously it's an anime art style, but the very vibrant colors have always been very Pokemon-like, Dory and her genie. I think that Pokemon and Genshin have always had a lot of similarities, the elemental system, the team building, and I think that this new region, it really looks like what I wish a Pokemon, I actually come from Pokemon, that was my main game before playing Genshin. This basically looks like what I wish Pokemon was. You can control your Pokemon or ride on your Pokemon and explore a really fantastic looking region. This looks exactly like what I wish Pokemon was. The only thing I will say is I think that this is going to be great. I think it's great that they can introduce new verticality, new types of exploration, more creative environments, and this would be a pain to climb. You need to have a mount to climb it. So I just wish that we could ride on it instead of, you know, turning into the creature. I'm sure we will have Pokemon mechanics, like I'm sure we will bond with these Pokemon, maybe even catch them. We've had the Omni Ubiquity Net before, which is the ball that you can catch animals. So we've already had Pokemon in Genshin, and I definitely see them expanding on these ideas with Natlan. I don't see us fighting alongside our mounts. I just think that'd be too heavy of a load for mobile games to handle. So here's the other things I want to talk about. Level 100. Will we ascend again and go to level 100 in Genshin? I gotta say, I don't think so. We've had rumors like this before, but like if you look at this, it takes 171 purple books to go to level 100 from level 80, and it takes about that much to go to 1 to 80, and it's sort of an exponential curve. I don't see them making us take 300 level books to go to another level. I could see another ascension, a 7th ascension, and maybe it does show level 100 when you do this final ascension, sort of like a crown that you have to beat something in Natlan, and that gives you a special new type of material that lets your character level up, because just having level 100 stats doesn't actually do anything. Like, you don't get that, like, you do get a huge increase. For some things you'd get a massive increase, like for Hyper Bloom. Level 80 to 90 for a Hyper Bloom team is an absolutely crazy 40% damage increase, more or less. To have another 40% damage increase, which is what it would be if they kept the same damage formula, would be bonkers. Hyper Bloom would be the best team in the game. Again, I just don't see this happening. They just worked so hard to take away Hyper Bloom being the best team in the game, so I don't see them doing it like that. I could see, again, a different kind of ascension that alters your character's stats in a much more precise and specific way. I don't see us collecting, 15 blue gems. That would be crazy, because if they did increase things like that, like if they would have to make level books and gems more abundant. Otherwise, people just simply won't be able to interact with the system. And if you make those gems more abundant, then they're sort of ruining the earlier game balance. Right now, it takes a lot of resources to get your characters to 90, such that most people do it sparingly. Very, very few people have all their characters built to level 90 especially. Even 80 is a lot, but 90 especially is crazy. And so if they added enough resources to have another ascension and more talent books to compensate for the fact that you'd have even higher amounts for the final ascension, it would just make it trivially easy to build your characters. Now, that could actually be a good thing, right? That could actually be cool. Everyone could build up their characters to level 80 or 90 and then only go to level 100 for their favorite characters, which would be pretty cool. And it could even be good for the game, but I don't particularly see it happening. But like I said, I could see a final ascension, and a final ascension where you get a new passive. So this would allow older characters, it would allow all characters to be buffed, but older characters that need more power and it would allow them to rebalance the game. It'd be a soft rebalance for the game. It would be an opportunity to make yoimiya in line with the other, with Lini, with Arlecchino, with Hu Tao. They could give her final passive, whatever it may be, a larger damage increase or quality of life increase than what they would give to Hu Tao or Lini or Arlecchino. And I think, of course, that this would be amazing. This would be very, very cool. It would be a lot of new content for people's favorite part of the game, which is their characters. If they wanted to rebalance important characters to the story, like Venti, they want to make Venti meta relevant again, but not in the same way that he was. They could give him some sort of special niche where he buffs characters kind of like Farazan does, or he's an increased debuffer, or they really double down on the energy refund passive and make him like Raiden, and then they just give like Arlecchino and Novelette a basically useless passive, or it accentuates it gives them a new playstyle, so it doesn't increase their power, but it makes them more flexible in some way, and in a way that doesn't help their old team. So will this actually happen? Do I actually think that we'll get a level 100? They are doing an endgame mode, like a new endgame mode. I'm going to say no. In my heart of hearts, I just don't believe it. I just don't believe that Genshin would do any version that I can personally conceive of. There might be a way to do this that is both impactful but also not too game warping, but I'm not exactly sure how they would do it without it being like an ungodly and crazy amount of work. And I think that anything that they would do, they would rather put that into new characters, because essentially buffing old characters does make them more money, because people might get them on the rerun. If yoimiya actually has a crazy new passive and she's actually good now, like maybe more people will pick her up on the rerun. Maybe people will have more hype. But I feel like that they would, whatever they could cook up, they would just save for new characters. So I would give this like a 30% chance of happening. That's kind of how I feel. So what will the regional gimmick be? And what do I mean by regional gimmick? So Natlan had the regional gimmick of HP gain and loss. And I know you're thinking it was the Uja Numa. It kind of is. Like, obviously that is a gimmick within the game, but I think that the bigger gimmick was the HP gain and loss. Now, not every character got it, whereas every character did get Uja Numa. To me, Uja Numa is like the superficial gimmick, whereas the HP gain and loss was an actual design philosophy. It's kind of like a new element per se. It's a resource that they use to manage. Like, yeah, for Novelette, Farina, Wriothesley, Lini. It's a way that they could create a little mini meta within the meta without creating a new element. They could have done this around Uja Numa, but they didn't. They chose a bit more of an elegant approach, I think. And so I have a prediction as to what I think that this type of gimmick will be in Natlan. And it's based on what we know about Clorinde, based on what people who have really studied this trailer and have other predictions about Clorinde. We know that her field time is relatively short. Her field time is 7.5 seconds, which is a fairly short DPS window time. We have other characters that also have a fairly short DPS window time, or that have a flexible time, that have come out recently. Chiori, very short DPS window. Navia, relatively short. Arlecchino, very flexible, not short, like, and she's better in the beginning, so the time where she does the most damage is shorter. But yeah, often people have said the best partner to Navia would be a second Navia. If you could have two Navias, it would be insane. If Yaimiko, who also has a middle DPS field time. I think that based on the characters we have right now, that dual DPS teams will be a gimmick of Natlan. I'm not saying the whole region will be warped around it, but I think two on-fielders is something that Genshin has never done, and it's something that they will do in Natlan. The end of Inazuma with Yaimiko, with Kuki, somewhat predicted Dendro in the next region. Baiju, like Baiju and Mika and Dea with the HP gain and loss. Even though Dea didn't end up working with the Fontaine characters explicitly, You could argue that the end of Sumeru predicted the HP gain and loss themes that we got in Fontaine, and I think that the end of Fontaine with the short field time characters, and that's not just the end, Navia is not right at the end, but this is, the Clorand is right at the end, and Sijuin also is an on-fielder that's capable, that doesn't last that long on field. Her stuff doesn't last a super long time. She's not a traditional longer field time DPS. So I predict that for Natlan, they will introduce a new wave of DPSs that only take up a short amount of field time, and a new wave of buffers that are better at buffing multiple on-field units. Some way they're going to design it to make that happen. That's my prediction as to what Genshin is going to do. They may have, in addition, they may have some special mini element like Uja Numa they have in Fontaine. They may have some sort of mini element of Natlan that interacts with in some way, and that's like a visual gimmick. But I think the dual DPS meta is going to be unlocked in Natlan. The next question is, what will the Archon do? And I think I have a pretty good idea. I think a lot of people share this prediction. We've all sort of come to the same conclusion that the Pyro Archon will be Bennett. Because Bennett is amazing, but a lot of people don't like to play as Bennett. They don't like to have Bennett on their team. They don't like circle impact. They don't like being applied with pyro that makes you very vulnerable. And they don't like that his healing only hits the active character. People don't like using Bennett, even though he's absolutely broken and has only gotten better, in my opinion, throughout Fontaine. I think his low point was Sumeru, but he's gotten better throughout Fontaine, with more and more characters having him on his best team. We have other options as well, but Bennett is insane. So what will the Pyro Archon do? They're going to solve all of Bennett's issues. They're going to be an attack buffer, but I doubt they'll buff based on base attack. I think they'll be like a huge attack percent steroid. We've gotten a lot of 5-star weapons that have high base attack. Arlequinos, Navias, and Risley's and Linny's are all low crit, high base attack weapons, and they would benefit greatly from an attack percent buffer. This is also a character that would also be an Archon that would not buff Novelette, which I think is important. And I just think that this is fairly obvious. I think that Genshin always does remakes of their oldest and best characters, and I think Bennett will be no exception. I also expect it to be this, whatever this skill is, or this ability, I expect it to follow you around. I don't expect it to be tied to circle impact. I don't expect it to apply pyro to you. I do expect them to have defensive utility. I could absolutely see it being shielding or damage reduction, or a mixture of damage reduction, like kind of like Dea. I could see them being like a Giga Buff Dea. Maybe not interruption resistance as much as Dea has, but I could see a mixture of maybe damage reduction and a bit of healing. Maybe so that it's not enough healing to work with Furina, so that you don't just like use Furina plus Pyro Archon on every single team. Yeah, maybe they make damage reduction characters so that it's not strictly a shield. You just take reduced damage for everything. I'm not sure. That's what I would something like that. And then I would also expect that they do off-field damage and apply pyro. So I don't know that they're going to do a Xiangling plus Bennett all at once, but I'm kind of feeling it. I'm kind of feeling a Xiangling plus Bennett Archon, which sounds insane, sounds power creepy. It sounds ridiculous that you could have two characters that would be in one. But obviously they would probably tune down the damage, so it's not as much damage as Xiangling. And definitely they would tune down the pyro application, but that's what I'm thinking. Xiangling plus Bennett as the Pyro Archon. And I think that they will look like this, but we'll have to wait. Like, obviously, I think they'll look like this, but I expect that they will have some... I don't expect them to be super dark. I expect them to be fairly bright and colorful in matching with the region. I know a lot of people are not super happy. They want volcanoes and darkness. Genshin doesn't do darkness. Like, that's if you get volcanoes, it's gonna be like this. It's gonna be colorful volcanoes. You're not getting like super dark. You're not getting Mordor in Genshin. This is too dark. This is too dark. That's what I think. And then the final question: what old units or mechanics will be buffed? I think that Natlan will either buff Superconduct, or we'll get a proper Geo buff. I don't know which one. It could come in the form of an elemental resonance. I wouldn't be surprised that they start the Superconduct buff in Natlan, so that when we get to Shenhe Nahida, it's already fleshed out. Similar to how Chevreuse buffed Overloaded before the Pyro region even got here. Like, we actually got a bunch of Pyro characters. We got 3 very relevant meta Pyro characters before Natlan even got here, which is a bit surprising to me. It's more than I thought. And even Gimmick is a pretty relevant relevant Pyro character. So very, very surprising we got this many Pyro characters. I don't expect we get all that many in Fontaine. But we didn't get very many Hydro characters, or sorry, in Natlan. We didn't get very many Hydro characters in Fontaine. We just got Novelette, Farina, and now Sigewinne. So I expect us to just get 2 or 3 Pyro characters, but I do expect them to obviously be very strong. And yeah, but I expect on the way, I expect a Geo buff and a Superconduct buff. One of them to be in Natlan, one of them to be in Shenhe Nahida. Really depends when they want to introduce Varka. I'm feeling Varka is going to be an off-field DPS, or maybe a dual DPS, right? Eula kind of works a little bit as a dual DPS, kind of. It works with Raiden. I don't know if it's not really ideal. You'd rather just play Eula as a main DPS, like the only on-field DPS. So let's see how my predictions come true. I think I'm spot on, but we really won't know until the region actually drops. Let me know what your predictions are and how off base you think I am. Take care. Bye for now.